Start. Good morning, everyone, and I wish I was in Bangalore rather than here in Silicon Valley eating dried bagel instead of idli sambar. But be that as it may, I look forward to talking to you all this morning on the subject of the next wave in the Internet and in terms of Web 2.0. Sandeep, the first slide, is it on? I cannot see the screen on your side.
Yeah, the slide's on.
Okay, great. So there's 1 billion people up on the internet today, and it's, guess what? More than half of them have come on stream in the last 5 to 7 years, and most of them are from countries like India, China, and Brazil, Russia, and some of these other countries. So if you go to the second slide, so more than half a billion of those have come on stream just in the last 7 years in all of these BRIC countries, which is Brazil, India, China, Russia, etc. And what is the most popular search term in India today? Anybody want to take a guess? Sania Mirza. So the third slide. So the internet growth started with the beginning of Netscape way back in 1994. If you think about it, Netscape was really an application on top of Windows. So the browser ran on top of Windows. It was designed sort of as a web top, but it really was a single app, just like any other app, like Word or Excel or any other app. And it was designed as a piece of software to work on top of the app. And they were then hoping that somehow the browser would become the platform. But the first wave of the web was about the infrastructure of the web. It was about web servers to make sure that you were able to publish things both on the internet and inside your company on the intranet. It was about proxy servers. It was about SMTP, POP3 mail, and communication servers. This whole second wave of the web, Web 2.0, is native web applications or services. So Google started life as a service from day one. Netscape started life as a piece of software when they first started, which was the old paradigm. So it had a software release cycle, it had a release date, it was available on a disk, and it was available in a shrink wrap package in a retail store if you wanted to buy it. That was the old model. The new model is the software is updated every day. It's running on giant servers that you don't see, but you get to use it every day. How many of you in the audience here use, say, a web application more than 50% of the time on your computers? That would be webmail, search, looking for information on the internet, versus a desktop app, let's say Word or Excel or something like that. By a show of hands, how many of you spend more than 50% of the time on the internet? So there you have it. So all of you are consuming more of the internet and less of your desktop-based applications. And this is the wave of the future. And in fact, how many of you among these applications that are services on the internet are using primarily email and search as your two main applications? Again, by a show of hands. So it accounts for 70% plus of the usage of the typical consumer is email and search. Because you're now living in the information age where you're used to instant information. When something happens half a world away, you typically know it 1 minute later. So the guy in New York has no more advantage than you sitting in Bangalore about that piece of information that you're able to act on, whether it's financial information, political information, news about your company, whatever the information might be. And that is the value of, the search piece of this equation. The other is, of course, email. And we are all, sort of email junkies to some degree, where we're getting hundreds of emails a day. And this has become sort of a way of life. Now, the third piece of the equation, which you've begun to see, which is the early days of this, is the internet as an entertainment medium. And I say early days because we're just beginning to see that growth wave here in America. It's obviously far more advanced in Japan and Korea and some parts of Europe, which is the ability to consume video. If you look at the younger generation of kids that are today in high school or maybe just entering college, in their time, they will probably consume more entertainment on their personal devices than they would on television compared to my generation. And this is truly happening as we speak. And it's a big deal. It's whether it's sports information, whether it's news, whether it's just sort of individual entertainment. They don't have to look at 200 channels of television that are available on TV. Every individual video that's posted is possible entertainment. They sift, find it, and then view it. So in a sense, that third piece, which is the entertainment piece, is the third leg of this sort of application set of services that you're beginning to see. So the internet was off to a slow start with Netscape back in 1994, and then you saw the advent of these infomediaries, which is companies like Google and Yahoo and so forth. And then you saw the advent of both trading and buying using the internet, which is things like eBay and Amazon. And this next wave is the entertainment wave, which is companies like YouTube, MySpace, Facebook, etc. Next slide. So I look at it in terms of sort of three revolutions and one evolution. The technology revolution here is the LAMP architecture: Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So essentially running on top of open source, being able to build an application. So if for those of you that are entrepreneurs there in the room, or working in startups, or for that matter working in big companies, you have the ability at a very low cost, so the barrier to entry is close to zero, to go off and build a nifty new application, which is really a service built on top of this stack, what we will call the internet stack, and be able to offer it instantly to the world. You're not porting it to Solaris and porting it to Windows and porting it to the Mac and porting it to DEC Ultrix and so forth, which was the earlier era of software harking back to the 90s. Today, the internet is the platform, the web is the platform, and you build your service and it's instantly available to 1 billion people. So you build your field of dreams. If the users come, you have a chance to win. If the users don't come, then you have to keep refining your application till it can attract enough users. So that's the technology revolution. The consumer revolution is really that consumers are now trained to be able to expect these services on the internet and use them. In India, of course, I think that platform is increasingly going to be the mobile phone, because many of these services will be accessible on the mobile phone. And think of the phone as your PC and your access device. And in fact, therefore, whether it's using SMS or whether it's using a lightweight sort of browsing technique on the phone, whatever the methodology is, the fact is you will be able to access that service or transact that piece of business using your cell phone. The advertising revolution was the other piece of it, and that allowed the larger players in the space to be able to pay for their growth and pay for the innovation that they needed to continue to do in order to fund their growth. So the advertising revolution was largely about advertising going from the physical world, whether it was in the form of newspapers, television, or other medium like radio, going on to the internet. And a good big shift happened, especially over the last 5 years. But it's still the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more yet to come, and that dematurization will affect other industries such as retail, such as the supply chain for how large companies manufacture products and how they procure items and so forth. So it is affecting a lot of industries and ultimately will touch every industry. And as they say, the internet will bring those efficiencies into all these markets. The Google evolution was one small piece of this story, which is the ability of one company to be able to essentially act as an intermediary for information across the globe, across many languages, and across many different devices in many markets. And that's become very useful. It's become an instrument of both information retrieval and of commerce. Next slide. So the technology drivers are the democratization of production and the democratization of information. It used to be that if a top world-class professor at Stanford or UC Berkeley was giving a class on, say, auction theory or on physics, you had to be a student at Berkeley to listen to it. Today, you could go on YouTube and look at that presentation. So I could see a world 5 years from now even, or even 10 years from now, lots of these colleges and universities will have all of these up on the internet, so anybody has access to that information. Today, you already have access to the world's financial information, the world's news information, instantly across the globe. So that's what I mean by democratizing information. Democratizing production is the ability to have a level playing field. Whether you're one person or whether you have a company of 10,000 people, you have the same sort of handicap, which is you're starting from a standing start and you're trying to build something. They may have more resources if they have 10,000 people. You may be just one, but you may be able to have the advantage of being really focused and highly innovative, and that's why small companies succeed on the internet as much as they do. Every year you hear of a new company that you've not heard of the year before succeed. The reason for that is the barrier to entry being so low and the tools of being able to create these services being almost close to zero and easy to program to. Broadband penetration in much of the world has been a great advantage in the development of the internet. I think the last mile is still an issue, for example, here in the United States. In India, I think access continues to be an issue despite some recent advances in infrastructure over the last 5 or 6 years, especially from the private sector. And it's one that if the government focused on and fixed, it could unleash a whole new economic opportunity across India. And in fact, the greatest example of that is the success in China, where there's today 120 million internet users. India has a market easily that size or greater based on the talented people like all of you sitting in the room who use the internet, and then many more who don't have access today because there is no access available to them, except for an hour at a cyber cafe. So that, I think, is a big lever in changing the equation, and to the extent that you all can make this happen by forcing the government to act on this issue, I think it would be a big boon for India, a big economic boon. And in fact, you would then go from serving the world in terms of software development, which India has done extremely well, to maybe going to the next stage where you develop deep intellectual property and catch this next wave, which is the internet wave, and have a large number of small and medium-sized companies. And I think that is the opportunity of the internet for India. The falling cost of digital storage, of course, has been a great advantage, and that's available worldwide to anybody. And I think that has also helped build these giant databases, which companies have been able to do, and also companies that are offering services, web services, to small companies to be able to host their new venture online. So, for example, Amazon has an initiative called EC2, where if you're a small company, you would essentially use their web infrastructure, which for 9 months of the year is perhaps less utilized than in the last 3 months, where they have a heavy amount of usage because of the holiday season and the traditional time when e-commerce happens in high volume. They decided to rent it out. What a brilliant idea. So there is another opportunity to be able to not even have the cost of a minimum infrastructure when you start off. It's really about making sure that the service that you're offering works for the consumers. Next slide. So this consumer revolution is about, the power of choice and about the power of being able to innovate at a level where you could be a single person innovate or at scale and innovate. And it's so easy to do thanks to all of this. And here's a progression of users going from 70 million to 100 million that you see here very rapidly for so many of these companies on this chart. And the waves here I've distinguished between 1994 and 98. It was the original information wave, which was defined by primarily companies that were in the search industry. Then you've got the distribution and communication wave, which is the next set of companies. The one I didn't talk about earlier is Skype, but clearly Skype, Google Talk, and Yahoo Messenger and others. And then the last one is the networking wave. Next slide. So I think we talked a little bit about some of this, but it's gone from early adopters to 1 billion people on the internet, and it works fine for both narrowband and broadband. In fact, India exists largely on narrowband, and still there's so much pent-up demand for more services to more people. And if only it were available, I would expect to see much more happen out of India. In terms of industries that are affected, I think you will see this in retail. You'll see this affecting newspapers and classifieds, the media industry, media as in the television, the content industry where they produce content, the movie industry, the music industry. Certainly the telecommunication industry will change in terms of voice calls and data services available. So it's all very, very interesting, and I think it's looking forward, this is going to continue, if only possibly even accelerate over the next 5 to 10 years. Next slide. So this, of course, means that many industries have to adapt to this change, and you're going to see that happening across many different industries. Some industries will go through pain, and here in the United States, you're seeing that, for example, in the print and publishing industry. There has been some pain from the shift in advertising dollars and the shift in focus of the consumer reading the news earlier in the day or the night before, just when it's going to the printers. They don't wait to open up the newspaper the next morning. They've already read it online the night before. The next slide. So tomorrow's consumers, my children and the young kids of today, they're global since birth because they've been Googling for knowledge and learning, and the internet is their textbook. I think Nicholas Negroponte and his new Laptop for Every Child project, I've heard him say that the first words out of these young kids that are 6, 7, 8 years old, whether it's in rural India or whether it's in Africa or Southeast Asia, has been, I know they can spell Google, and they know how to Google for information right from birth, literally. And that's amazing because in addition to the textbooks, the print textbooks, and the traditional methods of learning, the internet has become a great source of knowledge and learning, perhaps self-taught and self-learned, but it's a great, so things like Wikipedia and many, many, many other resources that have gone online have become an enormous source of both information and learning. Next slide. Now, I said there's a billion people on the internet today. Guess what? There's more than twice that number of cell phone users, and the fastest growing market in the world is India. So this is why I believe the PC will be not the choice device in India, but in fact the mobile phone will be the choice device for accessing information. So I expect to see the revolution in India to be different than, say, in this country or in other parts of the world like Japan and so forth, where they use cell phones rather than they use the personal computer. And a lot of that innovation can come out of India, not just for India, but for the globe. And in fact, we're seeing some of that today. Next slide. So the drivers of change are pervasive connectivity, the democratization of both tools and therefore the availability of information on that basis, and the falling cost of storage. Here's the next slide shows a quick evolution of one company's progression in this regard, namely Google, looking at it from 1995 all the way to 2006. At 1995, Google was still a project at Stanford, and in 1998, they were spun out of Stanford, and they had maybe 50,000 searches a day on the first day that they came up live. And today, you're looking at probably 100 times that in every tenth of a second even. So here's the scale and the volume of how things have changed just in the last decade. And then you could see the progression of products and technology and how things have changed. For example, you've got companies like Map My India in India that are essentially digitizing maps. You've got Google Maps. You've got companies that are trying to do payments online, people like Paymate and others. And then you've got the whole revolution going on in photo sharing. So the wedding photos are now instantly online and is shared with family that didn't attend the wedding. I think you'll see that happening with videos of weddings and so forth. And you could share it in a private manner or in a public manner, depending on your choice. So this is all something that, even 5 years ago we weren't doing. The number of digital cameras in use initially drove that. Then the combination of the digital camera with the integration through USB onto the internet to upload your pictures onto, into the cloud so the world can see it, or your relatives or friends can see it, enable the photo sharing trend. And the next trend that I'm just beginning to see is the integration of GPS onto digital cameras so that it'll actually tell you your location as well, and the integration of Wi-Fi onto digital cameras so it instantly uploads into the cloud. So think about how this has been a revolution that continues to progress. And so that might become another device. Next slide. So for those of you that have been in the prior world, and I'm dating myself here when I say this, way back in the 70s, we had big mainframes and light clients, and I don't know how many of you remember the 3270 devices, which ran these large reservation systems for big companies, whether it was in the hotel industry or the airline industry or other industries that were transaction and compute intensive. They were run with dumb terminals on the front end with these giant, big, water-cooled mainframes on the back end. Well, that was sort of timeshare. Then came big servers and big clients. By big servers, I mean the DEC machines, the machines from Hewlett-Packard, and certainly the large servers from IBM, all of which ran Unix, and upon which a lot of wonderful client-server applications were built on top of databases that were designed for those environments. And then the PC was sort of a front end, where you would run your productivity apps on the PC, namely your local applications, but for all the client-server apps, you would sort of access these large server devices. Today, the world has shifted yet again. It is very large servers on the back end with tremendous scale, with many types of clients on the front end. The PC will continue to be a client, but so will the mobile phone. So will the iPod. So will many, many other devices. Even a console, a game console, can be a device that is going to be used to access the internet. So in this, the processing is done in the cloud, the data is stored in the cloud, and the experience is seamless wherever you go with it. Now, content continues to proliferate at a very rapid rate. We've seen just in the last, between 03 and 06, 156% growth in terms of new websites and content, which is why the size of the index is just continuing to explode. Of course, a good portion of the new growth is coming out of entertainment sites and it's coming out of the emerging markets like India and other countries. There is still a large portion of the content that's in English, and we look forward to the day when the content will be in local languages, or where the English content will be translated into local languages. Now, I mentioned accessing information anytime, any place, on any device. Way back in 1996, you really had just newspapers, television, magazines, and then 8-track devices and radio. Today, in 2006, you've got all of those, plus you've got your cable TV, your personal computer, your cell phone, your DVD players, your satellite radio, iPods, video conferencing like we're doing here today. So many different access methods. And that list will continue to grow because of this whole plug-and-play model of the Internet, making it possible for you to design an application once and be able to have it instantly available to 1 billion people. So the computing cloud, your life online, just one example of that. I think I mentioned earlier, you used to go into a store, buy Fujifilm or Kodak film, put it into your camera, and then you would give it for processing at the local camera store. Today, you take your digital camera, you take your pictures, plug it into your PC. You can either leave it on your PC or instantly upload it onto one of the many, many photo sharing sites. In India, I think there are sites like Zoom.in and others that are very popular. And then you can then share it with the rest of the world. And the next phase of this is the publishing revolution and the sharing revolution. The next phase of this, of course, is doing the same with video. Now for a few more serious slides on where I see the computing cloud and the emerging direction of Web 2.0 going. So the innovation drivers for cloud computing really are the balance between the data-rich servers and smart connected applications. It's only as good as the amount of data on these servers. So data is the value that you as a company will derive because your consumers feed that data into the system. And then you take advantage of that and you manipulate the data and segment it many different ways to continue to build on top of it and add more value to the consumer. Whether it's in the form of being able to, based on their past history of how they've used your service, being able to offer appropriate information to them or appropriate products to them. So all of those sorts of things. So the notion of data-rich servers and connected applications. Devices that sync directly with the cloud. So the job of configuring and managing that device needs to be brain dead simple. It is so easy to manage iTunes on your iPod. You don't need to call your sysadmin to do that. You don't need to have a special techie come in and do that. It's sort of intuitive. And that's the way it needs to be in terms of building your application. Every web application is a piece of software, yes, but it's software above the level of a single device. So you're not designing that piece of software to work on just a PC platform or just a Mac or just on another device. You're making it so that it would work on the Internet, on the web itself as the platform, and therefore be available broadly across all these devices. So it's device independent. Let the device do what it does best and let the Internet do its thing. A great example of that is the new Amazon Kindle, which is a product where you can download your books and be able to read your book. So you would have multiple books on it. The beauty of it is when you're traveling or doing something, you don't carry 3 or 4 books. That's one example. So it's the same metaphor as in the iPod. What the iPod is to music, Kindle hopes to be for, say, books in this example. Each user controls their own data in the cloud. So the data needs to be one where the user owns the data, not any individual company. It has to be the user that's in control of their data. So data portability is really, really important. The web as a platform. The core competencies for the web as a platform are services, not packaged software. I mentioned that. Examples of that are Salesforce, Google Docs, NetSuite, many others. And I think you will see that progressive trend. All of the new software applications will be software as a service applications. For the old large companies that exist in the space, perhaps they'll continue to offer their software the way they always have in the client-server form with packaged software running on large, very defined platforms and servers, such as all the software that's available, say, from Oracle or SAP today. But the majority of the new work that's being done will be software as a service. And then on the productivity app side, a lot of that will move to the cloud, whether it's Google Docs or Windows Live or any other applications, they'll move to the cloud. An architecture of participation, so your product and service gets richer as users participate and use it, because your users are your co-developers in this model, and as they use it, it sort of gets better and better. It needs to be cost-effective and scalable. You need remixable data sources, and that allows you to have this sort of dynamic data that's more valuable than sort of stale or static data on your back-end systems. And I'm not talking about web pages when I say this. Web pages are all dynamic anyway today. I'm talking about the data that's sitting in your database. Harnessing the collective intelligence of the population, the crowd, the wisdom of crowds has become a very, very valuable thing for lots and lots of businesses. You can build prediction models. Usually what happens is people know something is going to happen or not happen long before somebody sitting in a sort of a clean chamber can predict it. So the direction of the economy, who's going to win the election, which cricket team in this latest test match, Australia versus India, would win. Those sorts of things. You could build prediction models, and these people would be ranked based on the success of their predictions. So the data that you get is somewhat weighted, and you know that the data is largely good because the volume of users responding to that, polling and voting into that model, will allow you to erase any sampling errors that you would get from, let's say, a small sample versus a large sample. So that has begun to become more and more important in a lot of economic and non-economic planning, even for fun things like sports. The value of the cloud is directly proportional to the scale and the dynamic nature of the data, and I think we covered that. The future. The future is going to be more native web applications offered as a service, no trappings of the old software model. So none of this version control, none of this building to different platforms. No scheduled software releases, just continuous improvements in software. No licensing, just usage and more usage. And the network effects from user contributions are key to growth and market dominance in the Web 2.0 era. Data is the new Intel Inside, if you want to think of it that way, which is the value is in the aggregation of that data and that information. And if you look at any number of recent success stories, Craigslist, Playshill, which is an application on top of Google Maps, which allows you to essentially personalize maps by putting up your own best restaurants in Bangalore, or putting up the places, the coffee shops that you'd like to go to, or the theaters that you'd like to go to, etc. StumbleUpon, which of course allows you to rate individual web pages or websites. It's the antithesis of the algorithmic search model, where this is more social. The social community defines the value of a page on the internet. And then things like Panoramia, where people are essentially taking their pictures of different places that they visited and putting it up on Google Earth. And it's so valuable because before you go to another town, you can look at some of the pictures that different people, random people have put up, and they've decided to post it up there. So the future continued. The race is on to own classes of data: location data, identity data, product identifiers, different namespaces. So that is sort of the land grab in this next phase of Web 2.0. The company to reach critical mass of data quickly is usually the winner. PayPal or YouTube are great examples. Operations is a core competency. You cannot win unless you have a 99.8% uptime of your systems, high performance. So you cannot have slow page loads. You cannot have your website go down. You cannot have inaccurate data or old or stale data. All those things are problems because the user will not come back. Dynamic scripting languages are the tools of choice. PHP, Python, Ruby on Rails. So this has become the norm now. You just saw this past week that Sun bought MySQL for $1 billion. So open source is accepted by all of the developers in this community. And they can, of course, appropriately tweak and extend and do things with it. But whatever they do, it's contributed back into the community. So this has not splintered the way, for example, prior open source technologies in an earlier era of proprietary systems used to splinter and fragment. Rich user experience. Rich user experience drives more usage, and the notion of a perpetual beta is accepted by the user, just that it can't be broken on arrival. It actually has to work. And the PC will become sort of the underlying device upon which all these applications run, but in India, I think it could easily be the mobile phone. And the growth of web apps will be the future. I hope many of you take it up as both a passion and as an economic opportunity, and go build companies that will not just dominate the Indian scene, but the world scene. With that, I want to say thank you and good luck, but I'm also happy to take just a select few questions. It's getting rather late in the evening here. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ram. I think you have some lights here so you can put them out.
The question is on.
I can hear you.
Yeah, the question is on basically all this is fine in the consumer space, but what is the enterprise side of the story? That's where I would like to get your opinion.
Okay, good question. The enterprise side of the story is essentially designing software as a service apps. So for example, if you look at, the best way to look at this is an anecdote. You saw what Salesforce.com did. They essentially built a software as a service app just in CRM. And there were other people in that business. There was Siebel, Oracle had a product, etc. But they decided to go ahead and build a new product which can be sold for 50 users, 25 users, 100 users. So lots of small and medium-sized companies. Today, 5 years later, after the birth of that company, you're beginning to see larger enterprises essentially use the same model, because they're saying there's no value in us running this inside our firewall and having to maintain this application ourselves with lots and lots of network admins and sysadmins and lots of hardware and lots of custom servers and so forth. So that headache is gone, and the software is continuously updated by Salesforce, except it runs on their servers in their facility, and they continuously maintain the updates and the version control and make sure that the uptime is there and so forth. So if the end customer, the end business customer, believes that you could do all of those things, that's your opportunity. And you could do that for any number of applications that are available. You could pick something fairly narrow and build from it, or you could pick something that's larger. But I think that can come out of India. And in fact, because there's this disruption in the old client-server model, that represents an opportunity.
Okay. You see, you were telling that mobile will be the computing platform for, in India. So by that, like you were saying, like you see, but the mobiles which are being sold in the market mostly uses, you see, old kind of models wherein only SMS is the only technology or voice is the only technology. So you need to say that all the applications, whatever all the web 2.0 applications, but they will never run on those devices, which are very very primarily which does just voice or SMS. So you need to do you say that like SMS or voice applications will be the interactive, I mean, the mode of communication will be only these two. So in particularly say like when you are going for the masses, large masses, like rural India or Brazil or whatever developing countries platform.
That's a very good question. That's a very good question. I agree with you that in India today, mobile is largely limited because of so few GPRS phones and the low bandwidth on the network. You really have only voice and SMS, and that's somewhat unfortunate. But I was thinking of the broader market in all the other countries where mobile phones are in use and where the technology has progressed enough that people are able to use essentially the Web 2.0 paradigm and run it with a browser and have a decent experience. So on the new Nokia phones, for example, that are available in other parts of the world, unfortunately in India we still have the issue of both bandwidth and the network, and ultimately therefore the older phones. But you are correct that if you're developing just for the India market, today you're limited somewhat to both voice-based, IVR-based systems and SMS-based systems. And that unfortunately does not give you a rich user experience for lots of new applications. But if you were to go to Korea or Japan or any place in Western Europe, and now more recently here in the US, you are beginning to see mobile applications beginning to take off in terms of usage by the consumer.
Okay, see, there is one more point there. So you are saying that is as a limitation. Why don't companies like in India? So why don't they look at it that is as an opportunity that all the applications should have a separate platform where they can communicate to even all the applications, maybe in a limited fashion, but still they can look at that as an opportunity as well.
I think you're right. Companies are doing that. They're working around the problem. For example, I know of one company that I'm involved with called Paymate, and it largely works with SMS to make payments for movie tickets or restaurant reservations or to pay your airline ticket, etc. So I think people are getting around it. I think another example of that is to be able to get, say, directions. You would have an SMS message come to your phone that would give you directions to get to, say, somebody's house or to a particular meeting. It would be nice if ultimately that could be a map on your phone.
Okay. Actually, I work in that direction wherein we create a platform wherein rural India can be easily available to the country. So as a whole country, we can any company wants to reach rural India, having SMS as a media, so that because there is a limited path. So we are creating certain platforms. So that's the reason I asked this. Okay, thanks.
Great. Good luck to you.
Good evening, Ram. I'm Vikas from Mobile Works. I'm just extending on this question. I would like to know what's your take on mobile advertising and mobile social networking. Because we are a company based developing on a mobile advertising platform as well as the next generation mobile social networking platform. You spoke about Web 2.2 and obviously mobile 2.0 as well. But your specific take on mobile advertising, mobile marketing as such, and mobile social networking in India.
Okay, I got it. So mobile social networking, let me take that first because you need to have usage before you can have advertising. Mobile social networking is very much prevalent in many markets. I think it's usually taken applications such as, well, I think culturally dating would be hard, but maybe I'm dating myself when I say that because the India of today may be much more open to that. But we've seen those sorts of applications here. We've also seen the ability to do location-based services by targeting and coordinating, doing your coordinates of where your cell phone, which cell site your cell phone is tied to and where it's being used, and therefore knowing your location and using that as a basis to target ads to you. So if you were driving on MG Road in Bangalore and the cell site that you were tied to was that cell site, then the advertising that would come to you would be the restaurants on MG Road or would be the pizza place around the corner from where that cell site is. And you would know that by virtue of the fact that that's where you currently are on your cell phone. So that's an example of mobile advertising. The other examples in mobile social networking would be to be able to chat and interact with people. I think SMS is still the predominant way to do it in India, and I noticed that everybody seems to be almost completely at ease using it, faster than I can type on those keys and make it happen. I know Sandeep has gotten business deals done that way, just using his the SMS feature on his cell phone. I can't function without a keyboard, a full keyboard. But this is, I think, clearly an opportunity where, because of the already cultural bias towards use of the cell phone for communication, social networking using the cell phone is not a huge leap. It's more a question of what those 1 or 2 or 3 really key applications are that you could build using the, understanding the restrictions and the constraints of the device that exists today in India, and still be able to get lots of users to use it. So that's your challenge. And the advertising will follow based on that usage. I'll take 1 or 2 more questions and then we will end.
Good
Okay.
evening, Shriram. My name is Vasu from Udru. Given the construct of Asian societies, do you see social networking scaling as a business?
I do. I think it already is scaling. For example, if you look at the amount of use of Google's Orkut in India, it is the most popular method of social networking. Of course, it's website-based. The previous gentleman has asked a question about mobile social networking. This one is website-based. But there's a very high number of users in India. I don't have the statistics in front of me, but it's a very successful product. As far as social networking in other countries in Asia, I can point to Korea. There's very heavy usage in Korea in terms of social networking using cell phones, because in Korea there's a very high bandwidth network that allows them to essentially have video exchanges using cell phones, peer-to-peer video. And then again, the success of social networking in Japan is pretty good. So, and China. So I think it's not at all a leap of faith that this will be a possibility in India. The question is, what applications, how quickly, how successful, and then ultimately whether it can be monetized.
Hey, Ram, this is,
One last question.
Yeah, Ram, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, this is C. Mohan of IBM. I was wondering what your take is on companies like IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, the big ones, in terms of their dealing with Web 2.0 kind of technologies, what your prediction is, what you think they are doing, whether they are adopting them as much as you think they should, and so on.
Yeah, I think the answer is yes. They're all working on this new paradigm shift in terms of the web as the platform. I think IBM is in many ways leading the way because they've been sort of espousing the cause for a long time with respect to both Linux and with respect to the open stack that I mentioned earlier, the LAMP architecture. The Apache servers, for example, today, I remember back in '95 when Netscape was selling web servers, Apache, who knew Apache would be the big success? Today, they are essentially, that free web server is the web server of choice. You don't even think that it exists in that stack, but it is a key enabler in the stack. I think without the support of companies like IBM, this would not have been possible. They're also doing a lot in terms of tools to make those possible and enable them in the market. And clearly, they've been very supportive of making sure that the hardware architecture has evolved to support these large open source based data centers. Because not everybody is using rack-mounted PCs as their data center. Many of them are using Big Iron from IBM. And that's a perfectly good choice if you're a large company. And you may just use it on your intranet if you're General Motors, or if you are, say, 3M or Citibank or whoever. So the idea that that the big players are somehow not involved or participating in this new revolution is not true, because I think some of the press has painted it that way, but they're all very, very involved. SAP has put a web front end to their products. Oracle has done the same thing, and of course Microsoft is transforming their company to be able to sort of support the new wave of applications on the internet. Great. Well, thank you very much. All the best to all of you, and I hope you have a great conference.
Thanks a lot, thanks a lot. I appreciate a lot for you having made the time to come all the way from office late evening. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Hello everyone. I will just take a couple of minutes. I would like to introduce Akshay Dalwari of CM Bank, who's going to talk for a few minutes, couple of minutes on
Hello, this is some time to people to.
Yes. No, this is actually for announcing ACM SIG graphs activities in India, which Akshay is spearheading. So I'll just give some time to Akshay to make an announcement. Thanks.